Danse. I wanted to share a couple of videos about tips and tricks for artists, especially those who are learning our traditional skills and our traditional arts, but they're starting out. And so there's a couple of things that I do. And it's funny, I've shared on these topics a little bit in the classes that I teach, but I've never just done a video about some of these. So they're going to be really short. And the first one that I wanted to share is for leather working. So when we're making moccasins, and I have these little ones that I've been working on for Nikosis, my son. So he's got these, there's some beading on them, and they just kind of wrap around in the front. I'm not done them yet. I need to do some wool liners, and I'm going to put some soles on the bottom for him so he doesn't hurt his little feet. But I really like this style of moccasin. It's going to tie at the front. But as I'm working on these and mittens, whether I'm working with commercial hide or brain tanned hide, one of the most important aspects of leather working when you're stitching mittens, moccasins, mucklucks, anything like that, is that you pull your thread or sinew very tight. And this ensures that you don't end up seeing your stitches when you turn it inside out. Most often, we're using whip stitch or pucker stitch when we're making moccasins. And then we also use whip stitch for all kinds of leather work. But regardless of the stitch that you're using, making sure that your stitches are tight is critical. And so I often use waxed sinew, and it's incredibly strong. It's not like cotton thread where you pull it and it breaks. If I have this tied onto something over here and I need to pull it really tight, I will likely rip the skin on my finger before I will tear or rip this sinew. That's how strong it is. It can be similar for a lot of other threads like bonded nylon thread, which we also use in leather work. And because we need the stitches so tight, and this is going to cut your finger as you're pulling tight on it before it ever breaks, it's important to protect your hand. And so there's two ways that I do that. Actually, there's three. The first is I will put Band-Aids on the sides of my fingers, and then I will pull tight against there. So I will wrap my thread around whatever finger it is that you like to pull with. So let's say I was going like that, and then I'd pull. And by having Band-Aids there, specifically fabric-backed Band-Aids, it will protect my finger from being cut by the thread. Now, that's in a pinch. That's if you have nothing else. I've also used like a glove, or those gardening gloves that are rubber, or like the reusable ones, or a thin deerskin glove. That can work really well, but it gets in the way of my fingers, so I don't like that method as much. This is the third, and this is the one I recommend. Making a finger sock. So this is leather that I've simply stitched into a tube that fits my finger that I usually pull with. I use my pinky or my ring finger, and this can be put onto either. And then let's say it's attached over here, I can wrap this around and pull incredibly tight, and it doesn't hurt me at all. It doesn't leave marks in my skin, it doesn't cut, and I can get incredibly tight stitches this way. So when you turn it inside out, then you're not going to see all your stitches along your welt or your sole, or on mittens, you're not going to see all the stitches along the sides. So it's so easy to make. You just cut a piece of hide in a rectangle, make sure that you can get it all the way around your finger, plus just a little bit else for sewing along the side, and then just whip stitch it all together. So it's just tied all or stitched all the way down. And I can put this in my sewing kit. I can bring it with me really easily. It just slips on to my finger, and I am protected while I am making moccasins or mittens. So I highly encourage you, if you are making moccasins or doing leather work for a living, or even if it's just doing things for your family, this took me 3 minutes to make. It was so fast, and it's a lifesaver. So this is the first thing I wanted to share with you. The second is a hide thimble. This is a piece of tooling hide. You can even buy like little tooling hide blanks for $1 or $2. And I cut out this shape. So it was kind of like a half circle shape. You can see it would have been like this originally. And I folded it in half and I stitched it. And I stitched it with sinew, and this fits on my finger. Now, the role for this in saving my hand is that I can use it for pushing the back of my needles. I don't use this method when I'm doing leather work though. And again, this will fit any finger I want to put it on, but it fits my ring finger best because that's the finger I tend to work with, because I'm usually holding projects with this, and then I can use my ring finger to push. And so this is, again, really cheap to make. It will protect your hand, but I use it mostly when I'm embroidering, especially embroidering on hide. So it's not as easy to embroider on hide as it is on fabric, and sometimes you just got to push the needle through just a little bit. And so I use this for that purpose. You could use it for leather working also. For beading on leather, this would be helpful. So another little hand saver. Now, the last tip and trick that I have is, it's more of a piece of equipment, and I'm going to show you. I have this tray. It's a folding out tray that you use for like breakfast in bed or something like that. I don't get that often, but this is the tray that I use for beading on so my beads don't go everywhere. And I've got this drawer liner that I've glued to it. And then right here, I have a little plate of metal. You don't need the metal. You could just use hide, but I have metal there. And what I do with this is when I am doing leather work, I will push the back of the needle so that the pointy side goes through the leather, and I'll push it on this instead of trying to use my fingers. And you might think, oh, well, that'll take so much longer. It saves me time because it is so effective at, just holding the leather down on the needle and then pushing it onto the needle with this as a backing. It's so fast. So I use this for all my leather work. I don't bother trying to push it through with just my my leather thimble, especially commercial hide. Brain tanned hide is pretty easy to sew. Incredible ancestral technology there, but commercial hide is very tough. And so having this will again save your hand. So that's the last thing that I've made to help me. But the last little tip is get yourself a tiny pair of pliers. The dollar store sells these. There's a pack of 3 of them, different types of pliers, and I think they're like $4. And let me tell you, it is going to help you so much. Now, I usually push through the leather. So I would have that board behind and I push my leather down on it. But as soon as it's through, I don't want to have to keep trying to pull, and it like wears my fingers and makes them raw. So I just use the pliers to pull it through. Again, you would think having to like pick this up, pull it through, push it down, blah, 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 would take more time, but it actually makes me a lot faster. I've made lots of moccasins in my lifetime, and I've made them without any of these helps, and I've made them with, and let me tell you, this is so helpful. So there are my auntie tips for you as you're doing leather work and making things. Go ahead, make yourself a little finger sock, make yourself a leather thimble, and get yourself a block of wood or something like that that you can press down on. If you use your kitchen table, you will end up with all these little holes in it, so don't do that. But even just a little block of 2x4, a little scrap of wood will work fantastic. That's what I used for the longest time until I made this tray. So there are my tips to you. I hope your crafting and artwork is going swimmingly today, and I hope to see you again. Kawapa matan Mina.